What's up, guys? My name is Colin, this is The Battle Bridge, and we need to talk about Star Trek Picard, Episode 3.
I don't know what happened to you, Rios, or to the Ibn Majid, but 5 minutes on this ship, and I know precisely what I'm looking at. You are Starfleet to the core. I can smell it on you.
Okay, right off the bat, I know we're only 3 episodes deep into this show, but I'm gonna go ahead and say Episode 3 was the best one yet. There are many reasons for this. Among them, well, first of all, we finally got into space, which is where I think Trek should actually take place. We got the return of, I'm not gonna say an obscure character, but one that a lot of hardcore fans remember with fondness, which is Hugh, and they definitely did him justice. And after the previous 2 episodes packed in so much information, so much exposition, Episode 3 took its time and slowed down a little. In my previous episode reviews, I noted the frantic pace of the narrative in episode 1 and 2. Personally, I've just felt like there was too much information being crammed down our throats, too much exposition, too much switching from scene to scene, character to character, sometimes interplaying scenes together, and it was kind of information overload. They need to slow down the drip a little bit and let the world of Picard breathe. Let us get to know these new characters, these returning characters, and this changed but returning world. And I think episode 3, despite introducing 3 entirely new characters, 4 actually if you include the EMH, actually did that. One of those characters was, of course, Hugh, and although he's not new to Star Trek, he has changed quite a bit since we last saw him.
But you are Borg.
No. I am Hugh.
Now, if you didn't know who Hugh was prior to this episode, or you're a little rusty on his origins, I actually made an entire video dedicated to his appearances in TNG. So go ahead and watch that one if you're interested in Hugh's origin and how he came to be. I was a little afraid that they were going to make him into some super evil, like pro-Borg revolutionary, trying to rebirth the Borg collective in some new form. But it seems he has not been made into a one-dimensional foil for Picard, and that's a good thing. In fact, we learn he is the executive director of the Borg Reclamation Project. Now, he's obviously not the only reclaimed Borg who is slated to appear in Picard, and given that he is the executive director of the derelict cube that the Romulans have taken over, I'm really interested to see how 7 of 9, when she appears in the show, reacts to this, or what she thinks of the Borg Reclamation Project. Something tells me she's not going to be in favor of it. Now, to me, the most interesting thing about Hugh's appearance in this episode was how he contrasted with the other former Borg that we see in the cube.
She's here to meet with patient 4822-2.
She'll need authorization.
This unit is operated by the Reclamation Project. It is under the direct authority of its executive director, me. Open up.
So when Hugh is removed from the collective, he's basically born again. He has no knowledge or history or connection to the sentient being he was before he was assimilated. But it seems like Borg reclamation technology and techniques have come a long way since then, because that's not true of the former Borg that we see on the cube. A character called Ramda, who we learn is one of the only Romulans to ever be assimilated, seems to be completely aware of her former, and I guess now current self, prior to assimilation by the Borg. She is surely a shattered, broken version of her former self, but she still maintains that connection. Speaking of which, she is part of the Disordered, which I gather is a group of reclaimed Borg survivors who have been psychologically shattered, damaged, or traumatized in some way. We're also told that the Disordered, at least this group of Disordered, are all Romulan, the only Romulans to be assimilated by the Borg. This whole situation just deepens the mystery when it comes to Romulans and synthetics and Borg. Why do they hate androids? Why would they sabotage Federation synthetics in the midst of a rescue operation of Romulus? Why are the Disordered only Romulan? Why, when the Romulans were assimilated, did they damage or harm the Unimatrix of the cube? Something tells me we're not going to know the answers to all those questions until late into season 1 of this series. Now, another of the new characters in this episode is Raffi, who we are introduced to at the very end of the 2nd episode. Now, in episode 3, we get her full backstory and her relationship to Picard, along with some new Starfleet issue uniforms.
What happened in there?
I said that either they accept the revised evacuation plan or my resignation.
Now, back to Raffi, minor quibble here, but I did not really like the decision to have her vaping in the scene with Picard. It's just such a 21st century thing. It's a very here and now cultural phenomenon. And yes, I know there are plenty of cultures on Earth who use devices like hookahs to inhale flavored smoke, and they've been doing that for hundreds of years, but I don't know, it still felt silly in Star Trek, especially given how the subject of smoking has been treated in the past.
I think it's called tobacco. It's a deadly drug. When used frequently, it destroys the internal organs.
If it's so deadly, then why do they use it?
It's also highly addictive.
How do they get their hands on it?
They buy it in stores.
They buy it? If they'll buy poison, they'll buy anything.
Another new character is Captain Rios, who is the morally gray, wounded former Starfleet officer with a heart of gold, who you know surely in the end will come around and become a permanent part of Picard's little family. He also has an EMH program on board his ship, which looks, unlike in Voyager, exactly like him. It also seems to cycle through different English accents. Feels a tad narcissistic, doesn't it? Now, on the EMH program itself, though, I really like how his personality is, of course, totally different from the person he's physically based on, Captain Rios, and I really enjoyed his fanboy rant on Picard. I feel like in that moment, the EMH represented all of us. Now, Rios' ship itself, I'm kinda iffy on. The actual design, the chassis, looks like something out of another science fiction property, maybe Star Wars or something. Just didn't really feel like it belonged in the Trek universe. Now, inside the ship, we see that he operates it via a holographic computer interface. It looked cool, I guess. I just don't know if I feel like it belongs in Star Trek yet. Obviously, it is reasonable to expect that there have been technological jumps in computer interface technology and that they wouldn't be using the same old LCARS system as they were back in TNG. Still, I am gonna miss it. Ugh, those color palettes and those sound cues, just so soothing. Now, if you watch my review of Star Trek Picard Episode 2, you know I was a little concerned with the apparent shift in Romulan forehead physiology. Well, in this episode, it looks like we actually got a bit of an explanation. Laris, one of Picard's live-in bodyguard/caregivers, identifies a captured Jat Vosh assassin as a stubborn northerner, like Zhaban. And she kind of like points to his forehead, which has the distinct ridges that we're used to seeing in TNG, while she possesses none of them, implying that it's a genetic trait that people from maybe the northern hemisphere of Romulus possess. I appreciated this little explanation, and I'm not too tilted that we're seeing more and more smooth forehead Romulans like they were in TOS back in Picard. After all, there's been plenty of physiological changes that happened in Star Trek in years past that have been more dramatic and more jarring than this. Just look at the Klingons.
Well, frankly, I never liked Earther.
Finally, this episode ends on a great piece of fan service, and I mean that in a positive way. We got our first engage from Captain, now former Admiral Picard, in the show that bears his namesake. It was a pleasant way to end the episode, and speaking of which, that's all I got for Star Trek Picard Episode 3. Don't forget to hit the like button, maybe sub to the channel, and hey, if you do have any fan theories about the origin of the Borg as they relate to these Romulans, well, drop them in the comments below.